The greatest possible gift for a being is not life itself, but rather magic. It is as rare as winning a bet, and whoever wins it will benefit for the rest of their life. To make matters worse, the chances decrease even more when it comes to magical swordsmen, but nothing compares to what happened. For the first time in the Burial Empire, someone with magic managed to reach the top by becoming emperor. It was the beginning of another golden age for the magicians, or so was expected. Laughter can prove otherwise, even more so when you are in a prison. A rarity can be questioned by everyone and even diminished. Doubts can also arise, but nothing compares to the family doubt itself. Ian was chained and felt the taste of doubt from his nephew Crony. Looking at him, he discovers that Crony hasn't changed, not even his fake smile. At least now he knows it's a fake smile. In his childhood, Ian counted on the tips and concerns of his nephew regarding demonstrating his magic to the family. He could rely on his uncle, but in the present, he realizes the truth. His nephew only invited him, and when he threw that bucket of cold water in his face, what was expected happened. He received a slap strong enough to mark his royal face. A slap that left him once again under his nephew, who only pushed him even further down. If the slap wasn't enough, there was also the possibility of stepping on Ian's hair and perhaps sticking a sword in his uncle's chest. Crummy wanted to end his nephew right there in the cell and would do it as quickly as possible. But a guard's shout stopped him in time. Ian would have a few more minutes of life while his nephew would check a letter from Duke Helen. He would also have some time to think about his future, or if there was a possibility of a future. Why was he there when he had worked so hard to stand out in the family? There must have been someone who remembered Ian Verosian's deeds, no matter how non-existent they were. Maybe there was someone as a voice called him hastily. It wasn't his previous nephew, it was Nam wanting to get Ian out of his torture. Ian might have smiled upon hearing Nam's news. Unfortunately, he immediately refused the offer, even though those words came from the one who taught him to be a magician and also emperor, and just wanted a full stop in his life. But Nam knew how to convince Ian otherwise by making him remember the past or the positive moments he experienced, specifically the day they were in the Department of Magic building. Besides that, it was in a majestic enough place to reflect the brilliant beauty of the moonlight that surrounded the Second Imperial Palace. It was also inside the place that Ian always hid to shed his tears. When Ian thought about giving up on the arduous tasks as a child, the place managed to give him a second chance. Nam never knew why Ian managed to dry his tears there and wanted the young man to find that out for him. For that, he needed to get Ian out of prison as quickly as possible. So he conjured a magic circle with his own blood, and that is a risky thing to do. Ian immediately warned Nam's madness because the conjured magic was forbidden and could cause bigger problems than death for both of them. There was no escape, and even Ian's nephew was arriving at the cell. Crony realized he was deceived when he found there was no communication from Duke Hilan and became furious when he reached the cell. Immediately, he aimed his sword at Nam's neck, who only smiled at Ian while ketchup gushed from his head. The last sentence Ian could hear from Nam was a wish that something divine awaited him, along with other words of death from his nephew Crony. Crony's life pointer stopped for a moment, but it wasn't his end. At that moment, all of Ian's memories shattered like small pieces of a clock glass about to start ticking again. Everything he went through during his life was lost, and a new possibility of life arose in a royal palace surrounded by beautiful nature. Inside the palace, the screams of other members of royalty entered Ian's ears. Malicious laughter behind a fan of purest elegance also irritated him. In that room were three people with different actions. One of them is Ian's father's wife, the other is a stupid son, and his father was forcing the boy to stand up. The problem is that Ian didn't know any of those people laughing at his face. Some moments ago, he was in a prison ready to join the worms of the ground. Now he found himself in a rich environment with new people around him. He didn't even recognize his own face when he looked in the mirror. Something is happening to Ian, but something remained unchanged. He was surrounded by royalty and should show respect to the lords. It was brought to his attention, but obviously he didn't understand anything that was happening there. His strange behavior was drawing the attention of his new father. Everything would be more perceptible if there was something to explain the young man's situation. The only thing he received was a letter that was a decree from the emperor himself. But he was the emperor. Things were too strange and left Ian even more shocked when he noticed the date on the document he was holding. The royal document was from 98 years ago. Ian was immediately frightened, but it wasn't just him who found reading the letter strange. A noble found it strange that Ian understood what was written in the letter and looked at him with a look of disgust. Ian could ask what was happening, but soon the nobles in front of him left his presence after warning him not to embarrass the family. Ian managed to hear the other comments from maids about an event behind his back after the nobles left the corridor. His attention didn't focus on such information because the year he is in is 1100 of the imperial calendar. He was not normal. At this moment, Ian is in a new place with a new face and eyes different from his usual. But he knew where the confusion he was witnessing originated from. The reason was because Naldo used his space-time magic to send Ian back in time. The leaves felt like the truth being told, stakes were cut. And Ian just appreciated what was happening while analyzing everything. The boy is analyzing those new people who were with him. He even received compliments from someone for his manners at the table. This person was Molly, someone quite influential within the empire. They were at that table discussing pertinent issues for the family. But a question arose about the choice of the family's philosophers. The person who mocked Ian was reluctant to give the name of the philosopher. Ian realized it was a test of family education. He gave the name Pyon as a philosopher. The noble was happy to hear that name and to know about Ian's advanced education. His father was also happy, unlike his wife. The noble decided to give more compliments and informed that the son of the red-haired man would be well received by the emperor. He also informed about a tribe from the barbarian east. After this information, Ian was lost in his thoughts. His father patted him on the shoulder to bring him back to himself, after which he realized a somewhat complicated situation. He would actually be thrown into the middle of the tribe as a hostage and accepted his fate right there, as he didn't understand the situation. Right after that, there were noises outside. It was Ian's half-brother getting extremely angry with him. The boy retorted by saying that if it weren't for the noble who was there in front of him, he would be sent to the rival tribe. Obviously, his half-brother was resentful and wanted to throw a vase at Ian's head, but the protagonist just ignored him for a few seconds. Then he absorbed those insults and decided to activate a power that was enough to knock his half-brother down. This was a warning for his brother not to mess with him anymore. Ian's gaze penetrated directly into his half-brother's eyes and scared him, asking for mercy. Nothing could happen there inside the palace. Thus, a noble entered the middle of the room to interrupt the noise. He was scared to see such immense power coming from Ian. The boy's father and his wife entered the palace. To cover the situation, Ian just lifted his brother and warned him about the vase. He extended his hand but left his brother scared in the process. That was all he wanted. Ian's father was a little happy to see the situation, so he asked a maid to take Ian to his room. Only that noble who entered his house realized the situation for real. There was an intense exchange of glances between the two, a powerful exchange. Ian's room is not the best of all. He entered with a maid and received the news that there was a letter waiting for him. There was a letter from his mother, who was being held prisoner. The boy didn't know her, so he couldn't show sadness. The maid wanted to give a reward to Ian, but she wanted him to share some of his food with his 5-year-old brother, so she asked the noble to do it. Ian placed only the condition that she would help him whenever she could. The maid was super happy and left. Alone, Ian had a sudden headache from everything that was happening. He reflected on the master's magic because he was sent to a distant time and to a place quite far from the prison. He even ended up in a different body. To find out the answer to everything, he should go to the Imperial Department of Magic. That was the perfect moment for Ian to test his powers. In fact, he really wanted to know if he was also a magic user in that world. Luckily, Ian ended up in a time with a body endowed with rare magic. Fate was also in his favor regarding his nomenclature because his name was also Ian at that time. He doubted it was a coincidence but had no time to discuss. The maid who made the deal brought a plate of food and took half of it to his brother. It was a very meager plate compared to the levels Ian was used to. Ian remembered that table that was full of food and focused on a striking fact. There was no presence of a plant called gula during the meal. Gula was a plant rich in nutrients and one of the main food sources of Ian's time. Initially, it was a dangerous and poisonous plant. Over time, it was discovered that it could be used as food. If Ian revealed the value of that food, it could cause problems within the empire, political state problems, coexistence problems, and it could also end the Great Famine of Burial. Facts he could resolve another day because his father awaited him in his office. Brats informed him that there would be visits from the capital and also that Ian's mother left something for her son. A white package with money and a letter that could be read by Ian's private tutor. Given Ian's current actions, his father decided that if his son behaved, he would let him see his mother. There was a meeting the boy wanted very much, as well as staying away from that man Ian didn't understand very well. Another servant appeared to fulfill one of his wishes and called Ian's father to go outside, leaving the protagonist alone in that office. Immediately, Ian took the letters and began to dissect them. Not his mother's letters, but his father's letters, and understood there was corruption there. His current family was diverting taxes to the capital. That was the reason why that noble had come from the capital and sat at the dinner table. At the moment of the act, Ian's father returned, and in shock, Ian turned off the lights with his power and hid. Given the emergency of the situation, Ian's father ran to the curtains and saw that his son was still there. Ian took the opportunity to demonstrate his loyalty even more by saying that he had not received the order to leave in order to stay. But he would have to leave as soon as possible because the Northern clan asked Ian to write a letter. To avoid mistakes, his father decided to call his tutor to write it. Ian took the opportunity to leave as quickly as possible. Back in his usual corridor, Ian doubted that the letter was really written by his mother. He took the opportunity to read while walking. In addition to informing Ian to behave, the letter had a very specific request. She had suspicions that something was happening in that empire and decided to reveal it to Ian. On another occasion, it would be revealed because a council awaited more information. It was another meeting of nobles in a food-surrounded environment. Ian and other nobles were present at the table. It was the perfect opportunity for him to find out more about the capital, especially about what they knew best. The first was that the rich ate well and the poor ate little or nothing at all. Useful information for Ian, because the noble from the capital informed that it would be useful to have new forms of food. It was an opportunity for Ian to demonstrate his knowledge of the future. He extended his hand to the noble with food information. The nobles from the capital were pleased with Ian's reception and giving the information that a harmful plant could be useful to end hunger. Another name came to the table when they compared Ian's figure with the crown Prince Gale. Gale was recognized throughout the empire and he released a rebellion with the Department of Magic. Unfortunately, he failed miserably. It was useful information that came up at the table because Ian found out that those nobles were allies of the second prince. Even though they might know about the family's corruption, there would be benefits in partnering with the traders at the table. Ian just decided to let the actions flow. The first noble from the capital that Ian met decided to ask for permission to walk with the boy for a while in the park. His father felt a bit strange upon receiving the information because he did not expect that noble to want to talk to Ian. Not being foolish, he decided to send his other son Chell to walk with the two. Due to his sedentary lifestyle, Ian's half-brother got tired within the first 100 meters. Another noble suggested they could rest. Finally, they managed to leave Ian and the white-haired noble alone to talk. Without much mystery, the noble revealed that he saw Ian using his powers. He knew it was magic usage, but still asked the young man if he was a magic user. This was something dangerous within the empire. Ian immediately refused the true answer. There was relevant information for Ian as the noble informed that Prince Gale was open to magic users. Ian was somewhat relieved to receive the news, giving a smile and asking if there was anything else the noble wanted. It was also the perfect opportunity for Ian to throw a bucket of cold water in the noble's face. He revealed the information about the double accounting, suggesting a deal with a man that could benefit him and his empire. Our boy was hesitant if the noble would proceed with the action if he did not get what he was looking for. The noble wanted the Book of Reason. Ian was smart and asked what he would gain if he gave the Book of Reason to the noble, considering that corruption was a serious crime within the state. The noble was also intelligent and used the fact that Ian was a bastard against him. He thought that Ian just wanted to be part of the family, but the young man was much smarter than he expected. The protagonist wanted protection before the imperial court and also a territory he could call his own. His goal was simple. He wanted to go to the nomads without having to go through the court. Going to the nomads was an arduous task, and there was concern about whether the noble would accuse his family of tax evasion. Going to the nomads would guarantee the young man's physical and mental safety. It would be a successful strategy for Ian because the nomads and his father had not had good relations for a long time. The nomads would be invaluable allies on a battlefield, able to win everything in front of them. Certainly, in the event of a war, the royal guard would not care about Ian and his mother leaving them to die. They were tempting and intelligent proposals on Ian's part. The noble decided to take some time to think about them and wanted to return to where the other family nobles were. Ian asked the noble for permission to stay a little longer. Ian's plans were also based on his experience as a person from the future, because he knew that the Durga Empire at that time was annihilated. His identity within that palace was only useful at that moment and would be lost in a few years or maybe just a few months. He needed to deliver the Book of Reason to Noble Magno and contribute to the Count's annihilation as soon as possible. His primary objective was to make the Celestials allies of his own empire. His allies would be the shortcut he could use to go deeper into the empire. In the midst of his thoughts, he managed to find someone in the corridor, holding a pink vase and covered in a hood. It was a young woman who managed to recognize Ian, not as young as him because she was Ian's mother. His mother had been contacted by someone else and she managed to reunite with her son. There was tremendous relief because he thought that letter would be his last communication with his mother. He was happy but also decided to ask her to know more about her. He began to question why there were so many gold coins in that package. He wouldn't use them and wouldn't put his mother against the wall. He wanted the lady to use those coins and leave that place. He wanted his mother to flee that kingdom, and she also wanted her son to flee it as soon as possible. Obviously, Ian would not flee and wanted his mother not to worry at the moment. The woman was extremely doubtful and decided to look into her son's eyes. The eyes were different from usual. They were brighter than the moonlight in the sky. She wanted to stay there to chat more, but nobles were already calling Ian, so they had to say goodbye soon. As Ian's last request, the information about Gula was given to his mother and a request for her to gather as many of those seeds as possible until the next reunion. They would have to follow different paths. His mother left the flower vase as a memento for her son. The night ends and a new day extends within the royal palace. Ian and his brother were together without fighting. What awaited them was their first training session. A person who was there caught their attention. The attention was drawn because Ian's brother hadn't appeared for a while. There was enormous embarrassment from Chell, but he reversed the situation by informing that even being royalty, he should maintain good physical shape. The person who approached them didn't understand much because they saw no harm in just watching what was happening on the battlefields. Ian was shown the training that was being carried out as well as the tents that could help him. One fact struck Ian immediately: war orphans were being cruelly disciplined within that palace. The person who approached them joked about Ian being a bastard, and the young man from the future just ignored it while his half-brother scolded for the insults. He noticed someone among those orphans. It was Barrick, an orphan, who caused problems. Barrick was so enraged that he shouted everywhere with his head down. Ian's brother was scared to see the individual. He was warned several times that no matter how much Barrick was in that position, he was useful. The boy did not have the natural talents that Ian had, and more negative comments arose from the person accompanying Ian and his brother. He informed that the person should know their place and not cling to impossible desires. They should simply accept the destiny that awaited them. Ian looked with disdain at the trainer because he knew it might not be an absolute truth. The young man decided to end the training there to give those orphans a break. It was empathy from the young man from the future, as he could also be lying on the ground. Beric had a shadow approaching him. It was Ian extending his hand to his friend. Ian did not harshly reprimand the disrespect the young man was showing. He lifted the orphan's chin and informed him that he would let it slide given the horrendous situation he was living in. But Beric didn't see much progress in Ian's action and just wanted the noble to leave him alone. If he didn't want help, Ian wanted his help to do a magic test. The young man wanted to discover if the fallen one had an affinity with magic. If a person is affected by magic, they can be injured if they are a normal person. If they are a magician, they will simply reject it. By pouring a canteen of water, Ian felt the energy of a magical swordsman coming from Beric. Rejecting the magic, Beric threw the canteen away and looked with an angry look. Ian simply closed himself off and decided to leave the scene. Beric did not understand very well what had happened given the fact that he regained his energy out of nowhere. He focused on Ian's back and left for his palace. Back at the palace, Ian was focused on writing a letter to his mother. He also pretended that he didn't know how to read or write. Another person was with him and was on a mission to teach the noble how to write letters and perfect his royalty. Increasingly, Ian wanted to know things about the palace, so he asked questions about the person's personal life. It was his teacher, and he knew that the boy was from the Central University of Burial, but that he might be there not to teach Ian. He could be there because of someone. The teacher was reluctant to give answers and just quickly left the library, where he was leaving the letter on the floor. The library was gone and gave way to more training for Ian and his brother. They were running together with their trainer. It was not the training that caught Ian's attention, but the screams from afar from Beric. The young man was slaughtering his training opponents even with a wooden sword. Blows were struck at full speed and hollow sword sounds could be heard throughout the field. The excitement was greater on Beric's part. If he got more adequate training, he could stand out, but he was just thrown against the wall. Beric could accept defeat when he hit his back directly but returned to the battle. He wanted to win that battle tooth and nail, and wouldn't let the blows go unpunished. Unfortunately, with just one kick, Beric's opponent managed to end the fight. Other people laughed at the situation because it was nothing more than a dog's attempt to chase a lion. Ian came to understand the situation a little more and tried to convince Beric of something he wanted. Like a Machiavellian, Ian informed that it didn't matter what means Beric could use. What mattered was his final victory. Beric was a resentful person, but he wouldn't play dirty, so he didn't see cheap tricks well and decided to point his weapon at a noble. Ian was just caring about that person and wanted to see him win his battle, so once again he extended his friendly hand. It would actually be a trade of favors. If Beric helped Ian would help Beric. The young noble had a strategy behind it. By having physical contact with Beric, he managed to discover who he truly was. He was someone who used magic. To be more specific, he was a magical swordsman who was about to jump directly at his opponent. He was holding back his power all the time, so with just one jump he managed to throw his opponent to the ground and even explode the ground. It didn't stop at the fall as he delivered blows to his opponent, who ended up terribly injured. Everyone in the training was in shock and started moving towards the pair that was fighting. Something worse could happen, so they simply restrained Beric, so that no one would die in the process. Never had such a huge laugh of satisfaction been heard. It was Beric celebrating victory despite having caught his opponent off guard. His disloyal attitude would be surrounded by consequences, so he ended up getting a kick in the face from the training master. His opponent was taken to the infirmary and Beric was destined for the punishment room. The trainer's eyes turned only to another person as Ian was close to the boy at the given time. Away from Beric, Ian would have several concerns, so he asked what would happen to him. Beric's fate was quite simple. He would be whipped and then expelled. Everything a time traveler could hope for, because without Beric behind a nation, it would be easier to use him. Ian returned to the royal palace. He was having tea with the guests. He was on that sofa to help the nobles report the kingdom's woes to the father. Ian's strategy in this case was to collect data on grains harvested in the territory, mineral production, and farmer rates. It was a decision that was very beneficial in the eyes of the nobles, as it would help them a lot. Still at that table, Ian noticed a seal that Mr. Mullen was using. It was the same as the one on the letter his teacher dropped. Everything was going as planned until Ian walked down a corridor and was grabbed by the collar. Beric invaded the royal palace to confront him about the things that happened to him. There were doubts about how he had entered that place. He managed to enter thanks to the count. He was not there to thank Ian but to accuse him of perhaps drugging him or doing something worse to him. The reason was simple. Beric saw no point in fighting with cheap tricks and low blows. This was an easy situation to reverse for a former emperor. He said the water was just a supplement that was helping Beric regain his energy. He wanted to reveal something more to the boy, so he wanted him to keep a secret that was going to be revealed. Beric needed to keep secret about the golden color of Ian's eyes, and there was also the boy's request to be a bodyguard. Without much mystery, Ian revealed that Barrick possessed hidden powers he never imagined he could have. It was still a contained power, meaning it had no offensive power. He needed someone to channel it, or help Barrick understand more about himself. Ian made himself available to help him. But Barrick was clueless about magic. He barely knew what magic was and didn't even know the definition of a magical swordsman. It was time for Ian to explain some things that happen in the magical world. There are a few people in the world capable of having magic, and this power is only released with training. Serious and focused training, because the magic itself blocks the user's power if not trained correctly. It was necessary to make a connection between body and soul to achieve the harmony of Barrick's power. The boy got a little excited and started looking at Ian differently. He just gave Ian a little punch on the forehead. The noble said again that Barrick should be his personal bodyguard. He had no family and home, barely had food to eat, so he accepted the offer without further ado. There was a handshake and a new partnership was formed. Barrick had good characteristics to be a swordsman. He was peculiar and never backed down, not even afraid of death. There is no greater power for a human being than the will to live. It was a partnership that could bear good fruit in a future of great conquests. Ian was even distracted by such thoughts of so much success. His attention was called by his father, who was drinking a glass of wine. Ian noticed a detail in his hand, a special and shiny ring. Rings could be a valuable and normal item among royalty, but that object had a hollow shape. It could have a purpose beyond appearance and contain secrets Ian could never imagine. Ian focused on that object, but again had to return his focus to the dinner table. It was an environment ready for casual conversations, and one of them was about the new friend. They commented that Barrick got into trouble during the training field. There was interest from Ian's wife in knowing what happened. She was astonished to learn that he had assaulted someone in the training field. Ian's father didn't care much and just asked him to focus on his studies. Furthermore, if Ian did not master writing and reading within a month, he would blame Barrick for his son's poor performance, and his fate could be cruel. While they were having lunch, two people were talking to each other. Ian's noble teacher appeared in the middle of their conversation shortly after the man left the scene. Catching Ian in the act, the teacher feared a little and noticed the young man's presence. Ian would use even more of his cunning and pressure the teacher by saying what his father would think if he saw him talking to someone from the capital. Ian would keep his mouth shut on one condition. He wanted the teacher to keep his father busy for a while the next day. There was also other pertinent information for the young man from the future. He wanted the teacher to use his knowledge of the desert and bring a map about the weather at the end of spring. To gain the teacher's trust, Ian praised his intelligence and showed confidence in his abilities. A deal was made, and it was time for Ian to explore his magic a little more. His new goal was to draw a magic ring with precision. This could be prevented by the death of the vice chief. Nothing Ian couldn't do without his father's permissions. It was a difficult situation to let Ian be recognized, so they decided to think a little more. The boy was sent back to his room, and the discussion ended there. It was the ideal moment to discuss the situation more privately within the family. Ian's father simply saw those people as barbarians, so he doubted the veracity of the messenger's information, as he was the brother of the clan chief. He would be away for a while to take care of the family register documents. It was everything Ian wanted, since he got the opportunity to have a private conversation with the Celestial Warrior clan. A way to strengthen his ties with the clan chief's brother was to convince him and give him a lavish banquet. In any case, Ian would have to go to those people's kingdom, but he would not go alone. So he immediately made a request. He wanted a personal bodyguard he had in mind to go with him. The Celestial Warrior clan wanted Ian to go alone, but Barrick could be beneficial for both sides. There were questions about how good the bodyguard would be, and the Celestials mocked the suggestion. It would be a risk for the Celestials to have another person on that trip. First, outsiders were not immune to poison and could not live in the desert for long. Second, they thought Ian was underestimating the desert they loved so much. Ian reassured them, saying they would be fine in the desert no matter the situation. Ian's request wouldn't come for free, so it was suggested by the Celestial clan brother. The fight to prove his worth was called. Stu, a Celestial Warrior, was present. She was just a young woman who seemed unconcerned about the situation. To prove his worth, Ian would have to let his bodyguard fight and defeat Stu in the match. The guy initially despised him and thought his opponent wouldn't be much of a challenge, but it was amusing for Ian. It was a huge concern, as he knew the power difference between the parties was enormous. No matter how important the fight might be, the god of death, Nesserin, was watching the fight. It was an insult to Barrick, but all he needed was to win to be taken with Ian to the desert. Fearing the opponent's power, Ian was going to teach Barrick a way to win that fight. Not only did he have to win the opponent in the fight, but there would also be a 5-minute time limit for Barrick to knock her down. It was more than enough in Barrick's mind, so he tied his hair and stepped into the battle. The quick dash was made by Barrick, but the opponent just stood still and soon moved behind him, leaving him bewildered. He was in shock for a moment and just got angrier as usual. She was just dodging and going to random places, and he was unsure where she wanted to strike. His doubt was answered with a kick right in the middle of Barrick's chin. It wasn't enough to knock him down, but it started to irritate him even more. The clock was still ticking, and the opponent's mockery increased. Blows were exchanged, and Ian watched from a distance, his bodyguard losing without even landing a hit. Barak was just defending himself and trying not to break entirely, but everything behind Ayan's plans had a strategy that also involved his partners. The girl tried to kick him, but with a mid-air strike, Barak disoriented her for a moment. By grabbing her, he managed to throw her to the ground and the fight ended there. Barak joked about the situation and left the girl embarrassed. It was revealed that the girl was sent by the Celestials only because they didn't want to see blood and she wouldn't cut anyone in half. Ayan praised the girl to try to gain more loyalty. With the fight over, he could take his bodyguard to the desert, but he still wanted to chat with the Celestial leader's brother. Back in the debate room, the first issue raised was that the Celestials found the fight an insult. It ended with just a grappling move, nothing more, nothing less. Sue had pain on her face as she was thrown to the ground. He just laughed at the situation and said that Barak had boldness in his moves. He also accepted Ayan's bodyguard's presence during the desert travels. The night ended with laughter, but in the morning there were important issues to be discussed. The first was the peace issue between the two clans that would happen in a week. There was a handshake between the two parties and a new alliance was formed. At least there was nothing that could disrupt the ceremony for a week, so the clans just waited inside the palace. With peace established, Ayan would have to go to the Celestial Kingdom to face the desert. Hannah came to say goodbye to the noble who brought food to her younger brother, and knew that without him there could be consequences in leaving a loyal person, especially since he knew what would happen in the next 50 years. He asked her to leave the palace and stop working there. He just thanked the girl for her presence and looked out his window for the last time. He was tired of that palace, and it was time to face new airs like the desert sands. There was a surprise at the entrance to the desert because Kakantir, the chief of the Celestial Warriors, was present. Various important people gathered to make an agreement, also to prove the Empire's lineage. The lineage could be proven through a potion where Ayan's father, and he would put drops of blood to do the test. It wasn't fair for only Ayan to prove his lineage. The Celestial Warriors should do the same, but the vice chief was not present at the moment. They also needed the figure to verify the veracity even of the potion that Durga brought to prove his lineage. But the agreement was still in effect and was sealed with drops of blood from the Celestial Warrior chief. It was time for Ayan to say goodbye to his current father and face the desert along with Barak. He was reminded of the reason why Ayan was being sent. He was going to honor Brach. With the lineage proven, the duo would face their adventures from the terrible sands. They stayed side by side with Chief Kakantir to a village in the desert. Immediately, the chief wanted to know about the situation of his vice as it worried him. He asked Ayan to accompany him to see the divine figure of the celestial people. She was lying on a bed, exhausted and very weakened. She was already of advanced age, and it was impossible to understand her voice or hear her from afar. It was an old dialect of the celestial clan, and only Kakantir could understand. The vice chief wanted to see the veracity of Ayan's dignity, so she asked him to come closer. She grabbed Ayan's arm and lights appeared around the identity as the future emperor was visualized and a divine will sprouted around him. The old woman knew a little about Ayan's identity and asked if it was a divine will by his presence. The vice chief asked a simple and direct question, if he had the blood of his father's lineage. She could see that Ayan had good intentions and he confirmed it by speaking in her celestial language. The vice said goodbye to Ayan and her leader. Kakantir asked his subordinates to give the group rooms after confirming their identities. There would be another engagement with the Celestials, a banquet at night. The idea was well received by Barak, who was already carrying a basin of food during the party. Everyone was dressed up using dangerous substances, also ready to talk more about their plans. The first topic to be discussed was Ayan's map, well received by the leader and used during the journeys. Ayan's creation was praised by Kakantir, but Ayan paid no attention. He only focused on another plant. It was the Gurut leaf that Barak was holding. Gurut was a plant that could be an effective stimulant for the Celestial Warriors. His father had used tricks to get the leaf. Then Ayan began to understand the situation better. The letter written by his mother, even though she was illiterate, was a warning from his father. He wanted Ayan to get the Gurut leaf in secret. Otherwise, there would be consequences for his mother. But the Celestial Chief was not a fool or immature. He immediately warned Ayan to stay away from the Gurut leaves reserved only for Celestial Warriors going into battle. Any questions or desire to have it from Ayan could be considered a betrayal and a breach of peace. Ayan just gave a fake smile to maintain his physical and mental health. Even though they appeared among the Celestials, it could be smuggled, and perhaps a breach between peace and the Celestial Warriors could occur. On the same bench where they were sitting, there was a person who interested Ayan. He asked Sue who it was, and it was revealed that he was a necessary member of the family. His importance was as a food manager and for glaring at Ayan like a mad dog since the beginning of the party. Ayan would have more opportunities to investigate what could happen there because the clan chief was immediately called. Maybe it was another health problem of the vice leader. The biggest doubt among the Celestials is about the health of their divine figure. No one knows when she might pass away or even how to treat her again. The value of plants was put on the table, talking about the legendary Celeste plant that could help. It was a plant that could bloom forever and for some reason made Ayan remember the vase his mother gave him. At the party, the vice leader's condition was already bad, but the next day it only got worse as she was unconscious. It was a moment of tension within the clan and also doubts for their leader. Any help could be welcome, and Ian saw a unique opportunity for this. He had knowledge about this Celeste plant and got the Celestials interested in him. Obviously, due to the stress, the leader just ignored Ian until he revealed more about the plant. He said it was a very long-lived red plant that they might have seen before. This caught Barrack's attention, and he would gladly listen to the only way to save his vice leader. This information would be much more useful for peace between nations than anyone could imagine. Ian had a request to proceed with his rescue suggestion. His request was simple. He just wanted his safety and respect guaranteed, not only as a guest of his father, but as a guest of the Burial Empire. If Ian could fulfill his wish and request, he would start to make a name for himself. The requests were not well received by Kakanter, who questioned what would happen if Ian died right there. Our boy calmed the situation, doubting they would bring an army for him, and also formed his resolve. Even though he had Durga's flesh, he did not live in the Imperial Palace. It was a selfish speech by Brash and also didn't make much sense. However, to save his vice chief, he would certainly do his will. Back, he was questioned if the protagonist really had the soul of the Imperial Palace within him. He had an emotional outburst at the moment. His eyes lit up upon seeing Ian again. Strange words were spoken that they couldn't even understand. The lady's health condition was getting worse and worse. They needed the plant immediately. Ian's mother's plant pot was in his room. So Ian informed and everyone ran to get the plant. All they had to do was grab that red plant and bring it. The plant hadn't disappeared or evaporated, so the Celestial clan managed to get their hands on it. It was an unparalleled help that Ian managed to give to the Celestial clan, and he was thanked by the chief himself. Despite having the plant in hand, they needed more Celestes to make proper treatment. So Ian was concerned about this. He was asked if he could get more Celestes or at least manage to bring more in some time. Our hero individually didn't know and had no idea where he could get more Celestes, but he knew someone who could help in this case. It would take a while to get back to his palace. He would go running to get more Celestes, but with a reason to disassociate his name from his father's image, Ian asked that he be given preference. When the Celestials had business to deal with, the strongest became the chief, and it was the principle Ian wanted to follow to build his reign. It was a difficult request because Ian controlled nothing in the kingdom. The protagonist had no power over the soldiers, no power over the grains, and not even the kingdom's money. It was time to throw a little of his future knowledge in the Celestial chief's face, and informed that soon the Imperial Palace would send an inquisition to Branch due to corruption. In less than a month, Branch's name would be tainted and disappear from the map. The veracity of his proof was due to the presence of capital nobles in his house. If Branch was imprisoned or killed, Ian would not be able to protect himself and his name would be forever tainted. So Ian played his bastard card in his favor because even though he was a blood son of Durga, he could disassociate his image from his father. There would be no legal ways to accuse Ian of treason. He could become the new Lord of Branch and build his empire from there. Understanding that Ian had not officially entered the family, yet the Celestial chief perceived a betrayal on Ian's father's part. The choice was in the hands of the Celestial warrior clan chief. Given the magnitude of the matter, he asked him to say more. Ian wanted something more cunning, which was to invade Branch's territory as soon as his father died. They wouldn't have to worry about the Emperor's troops because they wouldn't want to fight against the desert warriors. To further ensure the safety of the Celestial people, he offered the proposal that they could return if any situation occurred. The Celestial clan would only be a form of support and renown that Ian would gain by tying his name. But there were doubts about what benefits could arise in that partnership and tying Ian's name to Branch's kingdom. Our boy made his politician speech and said it would be a prosperous territory and would build the strongest alliance in the empire. There wouldn't be a trade relationship, just numbers and letters. There would be a partnership between two parts. It was an exorbitant proposal and full of problems too. If Ian's own father asked the Celestials for help to fight against the Empire, they could not refuse as an agreement was made. However, every contract is surrounded by flaws. Ian should take Gruet leaves with him. His secret mission could be the cause of the contract break between the two clans, but breaking just the alliance between the two clans would not be enough. Unfortunately, Ian had no physical evidence that could compromise him. He only had the confidence that he could establish a beneficial exchange for his new partner. With few options for the treatment of his vice leader, the chief accepted Ian's request and was impressed with the intelligence he had demonstrated so far, especially since Ian wanted nothing more and nothing less than the declared support of the Celestial Warriors clan. Ian didn't want an army against his father, he just wanted support initially. There were many oppositions as to why so many strategies. If Ian went to the royal palace of the capital, the only territory that could help him make his name was the very large territory he would expand. The protagonist wanted to expand his territory, but his expansion could come stained with blood, and Kakanter didn't want any bloodshed. Ian's plans might also be related to the current state of the Emperor, who apparently was not in his right mind. Taking advantage of seeing a familiar figure as he left the cabin, he asked Sue to help him. There was not an opportunity to get closer to Barrack, but to get revenge for the blows she received still in Ian's father's palace. Barrack would have to be trained because his blows barely hit her, and he should also serve as Ian's bodyguard. Blows were exchanged while Ian enjoyed himself. Ian expected the partnership with the Celestial Warriors clan to be a little longer, but it was quick due to the rare plants. Finally, he could rest a bit as he had worked hard on his strategies as the future emperor. In his thoughts, something also weighed on his mind because he was from the future and knew that horrible things had happened in the past. He wouldn't have much time to think about his current future, as he had to meet with the Celestial clan leaders. He wanted to continue the conversation with the vice leader. Again, he would have to prove the veracity of his actions, statements, and accusations. Being a divine envoy with magical powers, the lady said that Ian should change his own existence. Like the Greeks, the old woman was like an oracle, who could foresee and make suggestions about the path that the warriors and Ian himself could take. It was an unexpected situation for Ian, who reflected for a while still in the desert. Yellow fruits like grapes were given to Ian to show the people's gratitude. All the members of the Celestial clan were grateful to Ian for saving their vice leader. The vice leader meant a lot to everyone. She was like a mother and a divine advisory figure. Before leaving, he had to speak again with the two leaders to detail more of the negotiation. It would be soon, as Barrick's training with Sue was already ending in punches. The same girl who handed him the grape-like fruit also gave him a necklace that was near the pot. It was a necklace that made Ian's eyes shine, and it also had a bright stone like amber. Ian took the necklace in his hand and began to try to understand what it was about. It was something rare, and even though it was a prince, it was a jewel he considered rare. He wondered how a child who cultivated Celeste could put a necklace inside the pot. Someone buried the necklace inside the pot, fearing that Ian from the past might sell it. Whoever took care of the pot and the plant was someone special and perhaps sent by an important person. Ian had no idea who might have given that necklace and that pot. His attention was 100% on the necklace, but was diverted by Barrick, who finished the training. Ian didn't pay attention to the fight and just hurried Barrick for them to leave. He took the opportunity to put the necklace around his neck so as not to lose it, and saw the opportunity to ask Barrick about the desert warriors. Finally, he could focus on his plan that was working. At Ian's father's mansion, someone entered the door in a panic. People from the royal capital were there without prior notice. This could lead to the end of the corruption that Ian's father was causing. The capital's visit was led by Erica, adapting her investigators. Durga quickly came down from the office, tired and also trembling a lot. There was a search warrant, meaning the police knocked on the noble's door. But there was extreme discontent on Durga's part. They had protected that place from the desert barbarians, so why was he being accused of treason? But he knew very well why, yet he wanted to see the veracity of the document that accused him. The document contained exactly the corruption that was happening by the Count. He was in shock and could only watch as the guards began an investigation. It was not difficult to find evidence that condemned him and everyone in that palace for being arrested and taken away. The first person that came to Ian's father's mind was the old man from the capital. Maybe he had betrayed his own family. He shouted Ian's name for everyone to hear, but he was busy enough in the desert. The news soon spread throughout the entire empire and reached Bak's ears. His father's messenger requested a fight against him, so to redeem himself, he should sacrifice Ian. After this, our boy was called. Without holding back secrets, he revealed to the messenger that the one who was condemned was him. The partnership between Ian and the Celestials was stronger than any empire could imagine. Not being naive, the messenger attacked both of them, but Ian had his personal bodyguard. The training had paid off, and Barrick managed to stop the messenger's strike and would do anything Ian asked. The messenger's life was in the young man's hands, but he could make better use of that figure. Training is one thing to perfect skills and also to learn how to be a warrior, but everything could change against a shiny opponent. For Barrick to grow as a warrior, he would have to have a real battle, and Ian marked the messenger sent. All the members of the Celestial clan should see the fight between Barrick and the messenger. It was a fight to the death. The messenger was pressured and Barrick was calm. Immediately, Barrick discarded his usual attire and struck a blow at the opponent's sword. Blows were exchanged and the sounds of swords were heard throughout the arena. But due to inexperience, Barrick took a hit and was thrown to the ground. He was about to lose, so he had to get up. And since it was a desert, Barrick used it to his advantage. The blow hurt and he retaliated with a punch to the opponent's chin. The swords were back in play and various traces of blows were seen in an instant. The one who had the upper hand was the messenger with his sword right under Barrick. The messenger could have made a cleaner strike, but he wanted to play a little with his opponent and also concluded his mission. As soon as he saw his opponent lying on the ground, he went straight to Ian's presence. With his guard down, out of nowhere, Barrick came back and struck a blow from above. Due to his experience, he managed to dodge, but the blow created a hole in the ground. Barrick was not afraid of death and kept striving more and more to perfect himself. His blows were getting stronger and more precise. It was as if every drop of blood on the battlefield perfected him. Finally, he managed to deliver a lethal blow to his opponent and collapse exhausted on the ground. There was celebration on the part of the Celestial Kingdom and also by Barrick. He finally proved his worth as Ian's guardian. The royal palace of Ian's father was protected on all sides but could receive messages from the Celestial building. The messenger was Sue, who entered through the window delivering Kakantir's response. Several questions arose from the godfather, but Sue ignored him and left, just leaving the package. The letter contained the content of a betrayal by the Alliance. It was the breaking of the Alliance. There were no more ties between the nations of the celestial warriors, and they were subject to the capital alone. It was up to Ayan's father to fight for his redemption and to maintain his kingdom. He wanted to start the independence of his kingdom. All those investigators who inhabited the palace were subject to a cruel fate. There could be bloodshed. So Ayan's father asked the family to leave the palace and flee, but out of desperation, the count set the mansion on fire and fled. The capital's soldiers immediately noticed the problem and went ahead. Besides, the problem with the fire was that there were also people inside the mansion. The guards would rather save them or go after the count. They decided to go after Durga, and the captain simply left the people to die. Riding a horse, Ayan's father could only think of who he could ask for helps. So he placed his hopes in the letters sent. The only ones he could count on at the moment were his loyal soldiers, who were few in number but of quality. He placed his hope in his warriors because they were capable of facing any enemy. In the desert, Ayan was in Barrack's room seeing the bodyguard's situation. He had severe injuries, so it would take 3 to 4 days to get up. And Ayan had in his army only one man, who was himself. Even alone, Ayan knew there would be a secret path if he had the will to win. Ayan would try to speed up Barrack's healing with his still unknown magic, but immediately he only managed to get a huge headache. Kakantir and a young woman who entered were surprised to see Ayan in that situation. But they also didn't understand what had happened to Barrack because he was a little better, and there were doubts about why he was healthier. They attributed his recovery to Barrack's persistence. Kakantir could help with the recovery, and as the friendship between the two parties was already established, Kakantir gave a gurut leaf to Barrack and Ayan. They would be the first foreigners to eat and experience that fruit, which was a huge honor and a breaking of prejudices. An eagle was at the window just as Sue was at Ayan's father's window. It was informed about Sue's situation within that palace where she was sent, and Ayan would have to act again very soon but needed to rest first. Exhausted, he collapsed next to Ayan. The two woke up side by side, but Barrack was still sleeping. There was a noise outside the corridor, raising suspicions about what it could be. It was a murderous aura that matched Ayan's expectations. It came with a blow aimed at Ayan. He couldn't resist the opponent's strike, and his neck was grabbed. This was someone insulting our boy and even mocking his father. So perhaps it wasn't a messenger from his father. The protagonist grabbed the wrist and exploded the room with his magic. Everyone from the Celestial clan rushed to see the situation. Ayan was lying on the ground, but his opponent was lifeless or worse. It would be good to investigate the case, so Kakantir sent his men to gather more information. But the bigger question was about the huge explosion that occurred. Upon removing the assassin's mask, they discovered it was Boomart. Boomart woke up with sand being thrown in his face, realizing he was chained in front of everyone. Immediately, he begged for mercy to be released. There was a denial, and the assassin did not apologize for his actions as he was acting on behalf of the Celestials. He also warned that Ayan had a mysterious and extreme power. His eyes turned golden, and then there was an explosion caused by an unknown force, perhaps magical. Ayan was lost in thoughts about the incident and asked to speak. He could use the assassin as an even more valuable piece on the board. The boy saw that he could be an assassin sent by Durga. So Ayan falsely accused him of that. They also discovered more relevant information. They sent a letter about who would succeed the chief woman. Ayan had doubts and questions about the chief woman, but something unexpected happened as Boomart bit his own tongue. The protagonist wanted to further accuse that assassin and judge his role in planning food with the chief woman's case. Perhaps they were making poisonous foods to worsen the vice leader's condition and take leadership in the future. With her death, Durga would supposedly make money from the situation. Kakantir raised his chair and went after the traitor. He ordered maximum security for his vice leader, saying no one could enter her room. He also left carrying the traitor by the hair. There were only screams heard from outside. Kakantir came out of a blood-soaked room. A body was dragged out and the situation was resolved. Ayan was accused of being a magician, and he did not deny the truth of the information. He had to bring trust to the new partnership to confirm he was a magician or at least had knowledge of magic. He also needed to change the purposes. Kakantir was extremely irritated by the assassination attempt and decided to give him greater support. They would fight against Durga for trying to kill the vice leader and also causing pain to the celestial people. The problem was that Kakantir wanted Durga's head and wanted to be the one to deliver the final blow, if it was possible to help Kakantir. Once again, the partnership would improve. Friendly punches were exchanged. Ayan returned to Barrack's room and learned that he had woken up. The bodyguard was not well and vomited rainbows. He tried to find out why he was nauseous and his body was completely wrecked. The girl questioned why he healed so quickly. Even with Ayan's magic, Barrack had healed quickly. Unfortunately, Ayan would have to leave the guy in the desert to finish healing. Even though Barrack could walk, he couldn't fight for a while. He was saddened by the news and still wanted to help. Playing the victim, Barrack said Ayan would abandon his student. Even being a student, he had learned to use magic. The discovery left Barrack speechless, and another person entered his room. Over time, the palace became a fortress with Durga's soldiers. It wasn't just soldiers and nobility who were surrounded and protected. There were also innocent civilians in the territory. They gathered at the bank. The place was a neutral region within each burial region, also a sacred area that couldn't be easily violated. They knew where Durga was, so it was just a matter of time to leave as soon as possible. A war was happening far from the desert. showers of arrows and fire over their alliances and the situation on the war front. Durga had the idea of taking a rival city since they didn't have much firepower, but his plans might fall apart. More soldiers arrived. Innocents tried to get inside the bank to protect themselves and not die. Even the employees stayed outside. The maid who helped Ian was inside and saw an eagle flying. It was a sign that Ian was coming to save his people. He and Kakantir arrived at the village that had been brutally taken. There were bodies on the ground, fights for food, and enormous indignation from the population. Even in that state, Ian's people ran from those they considered barbarians. The children saw the warriors favorably, and Ian's presence comforted most of the citizens. Some of Durga's mansion staff recognized him and thanked him for being there. There were questions about why he was with the celestial warriors, and they also assumed they would help him in the middle of the war. Our hero was mounted on his horse while Beric was tied to the steed. The capital soldiers came to defend the bank, but initially the strategy wasn't necessary. They were there to resolve the situation through conversation. They were called inside the palace and were received by the captain of the capital. She worked for Mr. Molly in a certain way. Even with the celestial warriors around, she said she wouldn't need help to resolve the situation and would handle the tax evasion with the strength of her soldiers alone. She assumed Ian was there for Durga's execution, but saw no basis in his claim. Ian revealed his desire to stay with Brach because it was his hometown. They showed affection for the hometown but didn't convince Erica. Everyone knew that Brach and the celestial warriors were in a situation of enmity. The protagonist was the legitimate proof of the dissatisfaction of both parties. Ian used his bastard status to his advantage. Kakantir sent Erica to handle the tax evasion as they would take care of the situation in Brach during and after the war. The affront was not well received by Captain Erica, who just slammed the table and stood up. It was an insult against the Empire, but Kakantir told the girl to be careful with her words as he was the chief of the Celestial Warriors and used his authority. He even threatened the girl's family. The blame might have been on Ian's part, so she said no one would care if Ian died since he had Durga's blood. Ian should know his position before the Empire. He had Durga's blood, but was not officially part of the Brach family, so Ian was just a citizen of the Empire. A citizen who had partnered with the Celestial clan that was only there to help. The information made Erica even angrier. Kakantir dropped a scroll for the girl to pick up from the ground. They allied with Brach and wanted the people's peace above any king or count. As a peace treaty, they would need to help Durga with the Celestial strength, but as he was a criminal, they were no longer obliged to do so. They were trying to help the capital instead of Durga. Since Ian was the link between the capital and the Celestial people, they wanted Ian to be the new governor of Brach. Erica was even more shocked by the situation. A bastard wanted to become the new lord of Brach, a very important people in the Empire. It might have been madness on both sides if Erica hadn't heard right. Besides the blood ties, there were no flaws in Ian. The territory was at war starving, there were rebellions, and Ian could indeed be the one to take the throne. Above all, he had the support of the Celestial Warriors. Even if Erica accepted the power, the decision wasn't in her hands. The Lord had to be appointed by the Emperor himself. Until the Emperor designated someone, no one would have power over the territory, so our boy said he would take down anyone who wanted to take possession of his kingdom. Erica reluctantly agreed to the new treaty. Despite Ian being Durga's son, his relatives wouldn't be safe like him. He himself would help capture Durga. After capturing his father, it would be up to Ian and the Celestial Warriors to clean up the kingdom. If there was anything more than the partnership established in that room, it could cause problems. Ian would prove his sincerity by bringing Durga to the room. The two left through the door and headed for the war. Durga was always accompanied by soldiers in the forest where no one could find him for now. The eagles have eyes and managed to spot Durga in that forest, so the Celestial people cornered him in a rocky area. Maybe it was the end of the count. Durga's warriors immediately took the lead but were surprised by the Celestials and Beric. Beric returned to the battlefield even using only one hand due to the blow he received to his stomach. He was stronger and wanted to fight against those who tortured him in a way. In the middle of that ambush, Ian appeared mocking his father. Without much mystery, the Celestials and our protagonist managed to capture the father and end those soldiers. They brought the traitor still alive tied in a sack to Erica. It was a way to prove Ian's trust and the Celestial clan's loyalty to the capital. Durga's trial would be soon, but he would remain alive for a while. Despite capturing the corrupt one, they failed to capture Ian's stepmother or half-brother. Perhaps they had escaped the territory, but it would be very difficult. It was more likely that they were still hiding in the kingdom. Erica asked for them to be captured if possible. It was extremely important to capture all the nobles involved in the corruption, even indirectly. Whether captured alive or dead, their fate would likely be a coffin. There was a comment from the shadows that until the imperial decree arrived, no one would find them because they were hiding. After the battle, it was informed that Captain Erica was waiting for a letter of appointment. She would become the owner of the branch territory instead of Ian. This would be a problem for the Celestial Warriors, so they needed a plan in advance. It was only a matter of time before she became the Lady of Ian's people. But the young man could use the time to his advantage. It would take at least 15 days for the carrier pigeon to arrive with her letter, and they were still in a favorable situation. Worst of all, Erica's mission wasn't over yet, as she had to annihilate the entire Branch family. They were still in Ian's territory because they were sure their relatives were there. If Ian could capture his father's wife and his half-brother, he could use them as bait. This time he wouldn't have Kek enter his help, as he would be watching over Durga. Ian was about to leave as he had other important things to do. He would meet with Barrack, given the fact that he was doing outside work. He aimed to capture the other members of the royalty. He would search every rug and every corner to find them. He didn't have much time, so he would have to resolve the issues himself. Ian met with Barrack and was informed that he had finished his task in the forest. Ian's biological mother was fine and had no problems during the war. They were in the slums looking for Hannah. Barrack was somewhat reluctant to do the task as he was tired. They went around asking everyone where the maid might be, as they had no idea where she lived. She was holding a baby and well protected. Hannah ran to Ian as he had helped her a lot before and during the war. She was questioned in advance if it was safe for Ian to be there, as he was Durga's son. She had lived in the mansion longer than Ian, so she might know of a secret passage within the place. If there was a secret passage, the young man's relatives might be hiding in some basement. If the family's butler were alive, he might inform them more quickly about the location of a possible passage, but he was dead. Upon hearing about the butler, Hannah was somewhat reluctant because she had borrowed an item. She took the item when she was leaving the mansion, but she wasn't the only one to quit her job. Lady Mary was very abusive to her employees, even hitting them. The aggression might have been due to stress, but strangely she developed red spots on her arms and legs. Given the number of people leaving the mansion, Hannah borrowed an item from the butler and handed it to Ian. Inside, there were only letters and drawings that could be extremely useful or could just be burned. Barrack opened the box and many pieces of paper and documents fell out. One of them caught Ian's attention, as it was a map of the mansion that he might need. Some locations didn't fit very well and could be a clue to a possible secret passage. They focused on a tree drawn on the map. There was a sincere doubt of the veracity of that drawing, as it was questioned whether that tree really existed in the mansion. In a hidden place, mother and son were struggling because they were hungry. In the place where they were, there was only dried meat and silence to accompany them. A thought arose about where they could go and be safe at the same time. They weren't safe anywhere because a presence arrived at the place where they were. It was Ian holding a lantern and